Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's presentation is Creating a Great Conference Presentation with Dr. Sherry Goodill. While we're waiting for a few more folks' microphones to turn on and we're inviting a few more people into the room, just a quick plug for next week, Tuesday, November 10th, our usual time at 4 o'clock. We've got White Spaces and Black Faces with Maurice Kottman, the director of the Student Center for Multicultural Programming at Drexel. Should be a really good presentation. I hope to see you there. And then the week after that, we have everything you ever wanted to know about how to submit grants and more. And then our final Tuesday topic of the quarter will be Same Story, Different Generation, Barriers to Students in Higher Education, a panel discussion with a few current students and some alumni. So we hope you'll join us for those. All right, Dr. Goodill, take it away.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Darren. And many thanks to those of you coming in for this Tuesday topic today. It's relatively obvious. It's election day in America, and for any of us to be thinking about anything other than the election requires a great amount of cognitive discipline. And I'm recognizing that, and for that reason, all the more grateful that you're choosing to spend this hour with us and on this topic. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and the presentation itself will last about a half an hour. So I will be asking people to jot down your questions and hold them, because there will be ample time just for open discussion and Q&A following the presentation. Also, we'll be sharing the slides with all of you afterwards in PDF form. So don't feel as though you need to be, vigorously taking notes. Just go ahead and take this in. And I'm going to share my screen at this point. Let's see here. Darren, do you see my screen the way you're supposed to?
Start from the beginning, and I think we'll be good.
Okay.
Nope.
Nope.
No, I see your notes.
I know. Hold on.
Try the display setting option.
Did that? It just defaulted to that again. Apologies, folks. How's that?
Perfect.
All righty. Great. Welcoming in anyone who's joining us. This is called Giving a Great Conference Presentation. There is no body of knowledge about this topic. What I am presenting today and sharing is simply what I have learned over many years and many conference presentations through trial and error, both as a presenter and as an audience member for conference presentations as well. So it's really a collection of lessons learned, which I hope will be useful to you in your academic career and as you enter the professional space and participate in the professional dialogues that happen through conference presentations. I'm aware that those of you coming today are coming from different places in your own academic trajectory. Some people who have signed up are master's students, some are doctoral students, some are postdocs, and some are faculty members. And so when we move to the Q&A and discussion part, I really welcome your input from what you know from your experience. As I move through the slides and share with you some things I've learned, just let yourself locate some point of reference for yourself in relation to this material. You can think back to maybe you've already given conference presentations, or maybe you're anticipating one in the near future, or maybe you've been at conferences and it has generated your own thoughts about what makes a great conference presentation. What we'll cover here today is preparing the proposal for a conference presentation, the preparation of the content for the presentation, and the preparation of materials for the presentation. We're looking at that as two different things. And then we'll talk about on-site and technical readiness. And that will include some additional material that we've added just for this year's iteration, which is presenting online, something that is all anybody's doing these days. All right, beginning with a good proposal. Conference presentations are generally peer-reviewed, scholarly presentations for a professional symposium or conference. Sometimes there are invited presentations, and many of these points are still very relevant when there is an invited presentation. I'm aware that there are a number of different formats for presentations. It may be a single presenter. You may be on a panel. The format of a presentation might be all the presentation of content, heavily reliant on slides in a very presentational mode. It may be a more interactive component. And in some professional disciplines, a conference presentation could be a little bit more like an educational seminar, or even a little bit more like a workshop with some skills development going on. So what I'm working on here is to try to speak to the full range of conference presentation types and realize that this may skew a little towards the more presentational kind of conference presentation. First of all, be very conscious of the advertised conference theme. A good proposal will somehow relate to the conference theme in an explicit way. A good conference proposal includes all required elements. Really check the boxes. Look and make sure that you are preparing your proposal with everything expected. And it's good to work ahead of deadline with this, because most of the time these days, conference proposals are submitted online through a portal. And there is a very hard deadline at some point, usually in the middle of the night. And after that, it's too late. So really get in there, look at what is required, prepare all the elements ahead of time so you have a smooth process of the technical aspects of submitting the proposal. Don't wait till you're in there to find out, oh my goodness, I really need the CVs of all the presenters on the panel. And then you have to go out and get the CVs of all the presenters on the panel, right? Make sure you know ahead of time and prepare that. Consider the format of the presentation that you are going to be proposing. Again, panel, more educational, more presentational, etc., more scientific, more theoretical. Consider the likely audience. So different conferences have different, draw for different professional groups. What is the professional group to whom you're speaking or presenting here, right? Speak to that audience, and you speak to the audience from the proposal onwards. Because remember that conference proposals are peer-reviewed, and they're peer-reviewed by the same folks in the same professional society with the same interest areas. So consider that from the beginning onwards. Consider that when you write the learning objectives. Nowadays, most conference organizers are expecting that learning objectives are presented the same way that learning objectives show on a course syllabus, and that is using Bloom's taxonomy with very discrete takeaways for participants in a conference presentation. Use good writing. Use it in the proposal. Pay attention to the quality of your writing. Even though your presentation itself will probably be given orally and in person, they are using, the reviewers are using the quality of the writing as an indicator of the quality of the scholarship and content and the quality of the speaking itself. It's a proxy for that. So it's very important to write carefully. Again, work ahead of deadline. Don't wait till the last minute, and don't ask for special treatment. So let's say the proposal guidelines say there can be no more than 3 people on a panel, right? Don't call in and ask if you can have 4 panelists. work with what is required. If it's late, it's late. Don't ask to squeak it in, beyond the deadline. Just really important that that you're indicating your respect for the volumes and mountains of work that people are typically volunteering as peer reviewers of conference proposals. You really want to, there's a relational piece to this. Again, keep holding on to any questions that you have, anything that you'd like to share about your own experience, and at the end, we'll be opening this up for conversation. Then let's assume things go well in the peer review process and you are approved and invited to give the presentation, and you move on to the preparation of the content. Now, you might be presenting on something you've presented on before, or something with which you're very familiar. You still want to be very intentional about the preparation of the content for this particular audience in relation to the learning objectives that you proposed. And what I'm about to show here in this slide really applies whether it's an invited presentation or it's a peer-reviewed by competitive review presentation. Know the norms in this conference. What's the vibe in the conference? What is this group like? If it's a group that's new to you, if you've never presented to this particular professional community or been to a conference like this one before, check it out. Go to the website. What's important in this community? Look at the photos of people. There's always photos of past conferences on their websites. How are people dressing? How are they interacting with each other? What do the commenters say when they put, testimonials about what a great conference it is? What are people elevating that makes it a great conference? Be sure that you're kind of finding yourself and your material in the context of this conference. You want to bring something novel and interesting, but you also want it to fit in and be accessible to those in the room. In terms of planning the content, plan less material than the time frame would suggest. We're always losing a little time at the startup. We're always losing a little time at the end. And as we can see a little bit later, you always want to make sure there's time for questions and answers, if that is the format of the presentation. And if you are presenting in any situation where there might be language translation going on, this I have learned the hard way, plan about 60% of the material that the time frame would suggest, because the translation process takes time. And you want everyone in the room to have a good experience of receiving and really hearing your material. Truth in packaging. You submitted a proposal, the proposal was accepted. Stay with that as you prepare the material. Make sure that you are really reaching towards those learning objectives that you proposed. And what you're doing is consistent with the proposal. If you said you're going to be presenting some preliminary data, make sure you work that in. When you are actually preparing the content, make sure that that content actually repeats the learning objectives. The peer reviewers will have seen those learning objectives. The attendees will not generally have seen those learning objectives. So you really want to include a slide with your learning objectives and put that forward at the beginning. Most often, the attendee evaluations of a conference presentation will require that the attendee responds to a question: how much did this conference presentation achieve the stated learning objectives? So you have to state them. When you're preparing your content, be sure to recognize the contributions of others. That's always the case, right? With crediting your sources. If you are presenting as a member of a research team, recognize the other members of those teams. Sometimes people use photographs to do that. And if others in this very conference community have contributed to your scholarship, it's especially important to recognize those people. And generally, that's the case, right? We stand on the shoulders of others. All of our scholarship builds on that of others who have come before us. And if those people are in the room, you definitely want to recognize their contribution to your scholarship. And kind of funny because I'm aware that my esteemed colleague, Paul Nolan, signed up for this seminar today. So I am actually doing that right now by crediting something that one of our colleagues here at Drexel has taught me. And he is a great conference presenter, to keep in mind that when people come to a conference, right, and people choose to come to your seminar, right, they are coming for a few different reasons. The obvious one is continuing ed, right? This is a form of education that you are delivering. People are coming, according to Professor Nolan, to get something for themselves. Even if that something for themselves is affirmation that they're on the right track with their own work, or something that they thought to be true is backed up by evidence. They want something to use on Monday, right? This is a professional conference. People are coming in relation to their work, right? They want to build their own toolbox, their own repertoire, something to stimulate curiosity, right? Conferences are a place to share new knowledge and to generate curiosity for doing so. So when you're preparing your content, are there ways to build in all three of these in whatever time frame you're given to work? Now let's actually talk about preparing the materials. I am starting with slides. Not every presentation uses slides, but they're very common right now. Be very careful that your slides are free of errors and there's not too much text. You will see that on some of my slides today, I have not followed my own advice and I have too much text on some of these slides, including probably this one. Imagery on slides. Representation matters and imagery matters. As you build imagery, photographs, even emoticons and stock photos, be sure that your imagery is inclusive and multiculturally respectful. Imagery matters. If your conference presentation is one of those seminar type or practice type, skill building sorts of workshops, if you're going to include any interactive work, even small, turn to the person next to you and do some pair share and discuss something, really trial that ahead of time. Get a couple of close colleagues or friends to help you practice with that and time it. Oftentimes when you take a break for a little bit of interactive or participatory work, it takes way longer than you think, and anticipate a little more time than you need. If you're going to give people in a conference presentation time to do that, and then you're going to invite any sharing about that, it will definitely take more time than you imagine. So do trial that ahead of time. I've both done that in preparation for conference presentations, and I have failed to do that. And it's always gone better when I've done a little trialing of it ahead of time. When you're preparing your content, include some examples. People love examples, right? Just like with case studies, it's easy for people to relate to examples. It brings the abstract and theoretical to life. If you're presenting research data, right? Bring in just a little story of one participant to bring it to life. Have others ready in the background. Sometimes when it's Q&A time, the best response to a question might be an example. So have a few in reserve that you might use for responding to questions. If you're planning to use examples, really roll out that story ahead of time. Don't just have it in your mind. Practice telling it. Know how long it takes to tell it. Think about why that example is there, right? Examples are a teaching tool. Decide ahead of time on handouts, prepare them, or if you'll be sending files afterwards. So we're online today. Were we in person, I would decide if I were to make a handout of these slides to you, or if we would be sending them to you afterwards in PDF. It will, of course, today be the latter. If you're going to have hard copy handouts, Find out ahead of time, roughly, how many people will be attending your seminar, and be ready with that number or more. And finally, as you're preparing your materials, protect your own intellectual property. You see that I have at the bottom of this slide and all of the slides a little copyright note. And once something is in PDF, you're protecting your intellectual property in that way. Now, when you get the slides from me, you'll see that those photographs are taken off because that's somebody else's intellectual property, and I won't be distributing that. When you're at the venue. Now, I am at this point thinking about your garden variety on-site kind of symposium or conference situation. We know that right now most conferences are happening online. All of them are happening online, and I'll talk about that in the last slide. But at some point, we'll get back to getting together, and at least some conferences will go back to the on-site format. So imagine yourself at what is usually a hotel or convention center environment. Be ready, have your presentation ready before you arrive at the conference. There's nothing more sad than someone coming to a conference and then having to sit in the hotel room and cram to get a conference presentation ready. What's happening then is A, they're missing the learning opportunities at the conference, and they're also missing the chance to get the knowledge about how the conference is progressing. As a conference progresses, themes emerge, right? People are discussing things. Keynotes will introduce important concepts that then start to glue the conference together. If you're not ready and you sit in the hotel room getting your conference presentation ready, you're going to miss all that. You're going to miss the chance to connect the dots for your audience when it's time to give your presentation. So have everything ready before you get there. Don't have to get there and run around finding the business office to make your copies. It just wastes time and money. If you are co-presenting, spend time with your co-presenters and rehearse together. The same is true with a panel. Even if a panel has had a very good moderator working ahead of time, it's good to meet together. It's good to have a sense of each other, and it's good to time things out together with your co-presenters. This is not the time to improvise, right? Even those of us who work in the arts and love improvisation, this is not a time to improvise. Set your slides in slideshow mode for your practice. And when you practice, and maybe this is at home before you get to the conference, practice literally physically. Okay, I'm a dance movement therapist, so I'm all about what happens physically in our bodies as we're doing things and how that connects to cognition and emotion and relationship. And from experience, I can tell you that when you're practicing through your slideshow at home, however you will be delivering that presentation, put your body in that situation. This is actually using a concept called context-dependent learning, memory, and behavior. So if you'll be standing to practice, to give your presentation, stand to practice it, right? Learn what it's like to be on your feet to do that, not cuddled up on your sofa with your laptop. Practice your technology actions, switching if you need to from a little video clip back to your slides, switching if you need to from one mode to another. And regardless of what type of computer you have, bring your own adapter for any kind of projecting technology that is going to be there at the conference. I have seen presentations tanked because people were running around looking for the right adapter to fit a computer with the projector. So invest in an adapter that works for your computer and bring it with you. Try not to be reliant on a good internet connection. So this really goes with my last bullet point here of having versions of all presentation materials in different manifestations in case of technical issues. Many times at convention centers or hotel venues for conferences, the internet connection can be really overwhelmed. And you could find yourself assigned to a seminar room deep into the conference space, and the internet might be weak there. So be sure that you've downloaded already anything you need to access and include during your presentation, so you're not stuck with slow buffering speeds or not being able to get online when you need to get online. Again, backup versions of presentation materials. Maybe you have it on a flash drive and you have it in your hard drive. If you have to switch to somebody else's laptop at the very end, you've got it on your flash drive. Make sure that you are nimble in that way, because things can happen at the last minute. If possible, visit that actual space ahead of time. My first slide showed a conference seminar room filling, beforehand to fill it. It's good to go into that space. How are things set up? How big is the space? Can you project your voice into that space? Will you be using a microphone? Do you have experience with using microphones, right? Just get a little familiar ahead of time. Typically in conference venues, one seminar is ending, another one is starting. There's a transition going on. You might not get a lot of time to get the lay of the land. Generally, when you arrive at the conference, you'll see where your seminar is located. Just take a little walk there and circle there and get a feel for what it's like in that space. Know how to find it. And then you're on. To give a conference presentation is something between a performance and a teaching moment. So you're kind of bringing that part of yourself to it. Outline the use of time for attendees. So you gather, everyone arrives, tell people how you're going to use the time. If it's a long presentation and you're planning on a break in the middle, tell people when you're going to take that break. If there will be a participatory component, we in the creative arts therapy sometimes talk about experiential learning, and that's learning by doing. That's what that reference is. Give very clear directions for them, and also be sure to invite opt-outs. Not everybody is comfortable with those practice modes of learning or the interactive modes of learning. Make sure you let people know they're able to opt out. Guide your participants around holding questions. Say that at the beginning, right? If it's your preference to present right through and ask people to hold questions, you got to say that. You don't want to have somebody raise their hand with the question and then, right, have to close that down. That's much more difficult to do. Again, make sure you leave time for Q&A and discussion. Time things so that you bring your presentation and the Q&A to closure promptly on the posted ending time or just beforehand, right? You don't want to be just packing things in while people are already getting ready to leave the room and go on to their next thing. Make sure to leave time to explicitly request feedback on the evaluations of your seminar. It's very important to get that feedback. Make sure people know that's important to you. Even though things shift quickly at conferences, try not to have anything scheduled for yourself immediately afterwards. Try to schedule your own time so that you're able to stay around afterwards to talk with individuals. People are coming to your seminar because they're interested in your topic. Be ready to network. That's a big reason why we give conference presentations, is to create a network of those with common interests and to be able to potentiate your own work and that of others through the sharing. And you definitely want to be available for those conversations live if you can. Have your business cards with you and be ready to distribute them. That's part of that same networking function that is always going on at the professional symposia. All right, this is my last slide. So we're going to be going into some Q&A later. I hope you have some interesting things to talk about at this point. When it's online, right? For whatever reason, it might be online. It's mostly the same, but there are some other things to consider. Certainly everything about the proposal and the preparation of content is the same. But then the piece about actually giving it is different. And I think it's important to consider these also. And we've all been attending virtual conferences and presentations from the time of COVID in March onwards, and we've seen things go well and we've seen things fall apart. And so this too comes from the trial and error, my own and that of others, specifically or mainly in the last 7 or so months. What's going to be the platform? Are you preparing something that will be pre-recorded or live, or a combination of the two? Conferences sometimes include a pre-recorded presentation followed by a live Q&A panel. Is it Zoom? It's most likely Zoom these days, but it could be something else. Again, will it be a webinar setup that restricts the participation of attendees, or will it be more like what we're doing today in a meeting setup where everyone is potentially visible? Depending on the host organization, there may be a lot of technical support or there may be very little. Are you actually acting as the host for this, meaning you're also going to be managing some of the technology, or is there technical backup, as we are privileged to have today with the CNHP programs? Within the Zoom platform, or whatever platform is being used, depending on the format, webinar versus meeting versus something else, depending on whether you're the host, understand which functions are available to you and which functions are available to participants. Decide ahead about the chat function if that's available to participants. As we were preparing for today, I shared with Darren my personal preference to not have the chat flashing up all the time, just because I get very distracted by that. And so I could make that call that will hold on that until the end. We all know that in this time of COVID, everyone is working from home. And haven't we all seen far too much of other people's homes in the background? If you're doing a formal, professional symposium presentation, of course you may be doing it from your home, but it is still a professional event. So when you are in that moment, when you are, whether you're recording or whether or not you're giving this talk live, really think about the background, really think about the lighting, think about your sound environment, your camera angles, think about your own comfort, right? Think about what you're wearing. And make sure you have reliable internet. Now, I won't go through all of these elements because the guidance for these is easily available. But put this on your checklist if you're going to be giving an online symposium presentation. Make sure all of these are optimal given your resources. Prepare your computer for smooth transitions. As we mentioned before, just the same way as if you're in a live presentation situation. And again, if it's pre-recorded versus real-time delivery, there are several different formats for pre-recording. The host institute organization might have some preferences for what kind of pre-recording you might use, or that may be up to you. If it's pre-recorded and you haven't done that yet, explore what's available to you in terms of software and recording options so that you're able to do that smoothly. Another reason to really work ahead because sometimes recording just doesn't work out the way you want it to. This is actually the end of my prepared remarks, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and open this up to discussion and Q&A, and we're going to also see who's here. And great. So if you are comfortable with turning your video on to participate, you're also welcome, if your sound environment permits, to open your mics, and we can just have the discussion that approximates being in live space together and a flow of conversation. I'd love to know why you chose to come to the seminar, what you hope to get out of it, and if you'd like to pursue any of these points a little bit further, or maybe you have a completely different experience and question you'd like to raise.
I just want to say thank you, Sherry. That was really informative. I would say the advice about going into the physical space and checking it out to make sure that your room looks the way you want it to holds not just for conferences, but when you're working on your dissertation or you're presenting anything anywhere. Um, Understanding what the physical layout is will help you visualize where you need to position yourself so that your audience is getting the message as cleanly as you can deliver in that space.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other piece that the other piece that sort of struck me as I was listening in is like, yeah, when we transitioned from Tuesday topics being in person to all online, all the time, it took me a minute to sort of rethink how we can best formulate these and deliver the message. So the practice that we've developed about checking in to make sure that the questions are managed and how those are managed are questions that I typically ask folks when we're getting set up. So, thanks.
At this point, you're welcome to put questions in the chat or simply to unmute, introduce yourself, and put it right out there. Or maybe you've had a different experience from things I've described. So anybody?
Hi, I'm Kevin Abel. I'm a PhD student in the Rehabilitation Sciences program.
Hi, Kevin.
So thanks for your presentation. It had a lot of useful information. I'm trying to work on my presentation skills right now. So it was great to hear your perspective on what makes a good presentation. So last year I had my first opportunity to do a podium presentation at a conference. And despite trying my best to prepare ahead of time and rehearse the presentation and things like that ahead of time, it felt very different, and I felt like a lot of that stuff ended up going out of the window kind of when it came time to actually present in front of the audience who are very knowledgeable about the topic and things like that. So do you have any advice for, I guess you shared some already, but do you have any other advice about how to kind of best mimic that and like that environment and getting ready for those situations that may be a little intimidating?
Yeah, I do. I'd first like to check in quickly with our other attendees. I'm nodding my head because I understand that time. I can't see everybody. Are there others who have either had this experience that Kevin is describing, or perhaps you think you might have that experience with first presentations? Anybody else?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sophie. I'm from the psychology department, and I'm a master's student, so this is all new to me. I don't have any specific questions, but I can definitely relate into being sometimes intimidated when you're beginning a presentation, and perhaps you don't know your audience members well, or you don't know what they expect out of your presentation. So I would say that that's my biggest hurdle is that I'm trying to get over with my presentation skills, and primarily why I'm here today is how can I, teach them something new, even though they're already knowledgeable about the area. So, what are they expecting?
Yeah, that's great. I do hear the through line between the two experiences that the both of you are describing, and happy to respond from my own experience, and also that I've advised a lot of master's and doctoral students who go on to present their work at conferences, and I've been in the room. So I can see that from a number of vantage points. Feeling ready. So, you might need some kind of mantra for yourself. What do you typically tell yourself when you're anxious? Or what do you typically tell yourself when you need to sort of take a big step over your fears? About something like this. I think when it's early in one's career, it's very exciting and heady to be presenting at a conference. And it's also very normal for a little imposter syndrome to set in, right? And who am I to be talking to all these people about this? And I think if you have accurately and carefully stayed within the scope of what you do in fact know for your presentation, and you're not going to overshoot your own competence and scope, you're going to be fine. And when you communicate that, I also think that for new presenters in a professional society, without oversharing about your anxiety and without, being obsequious, you can't give away your authority. You do have authority over this little chunk of knowledge that you're contributing, right? But you're also coming into it with humility, right? And that's why you credit people whose work has contributed to your own. And I think when you do that, you communicate your humility and you do position yourself correctly at the beginning of your academic trajectory. And to be honest, in most professional societies, the old timers, the big names, they are ready and welcome to hear the new voices and to identify the new talent and to support the new talent. So you can kind of keep that in mind too. Like, yeah, you don't have it all. You don't have everything all these people have, but you got there, right? And you got there because there's a little new thing you have, right? And because your mentors trust you to represent that. So another thing you can do as you're kind of, taking that debut step into that professional conversation is to rely on your mentors. And that is take that practice trial, take your slides ahead of time to your faculty mentor who helped you get to here this place anyway. Have them look at your slides for you, right? They may not have many corrections, but you go into that space knowing you have their vote of confidence with what you have. So just maybe there are almost things to do on the back end that can help. However, and Kevin, I'm going back to your original story, which as I got there and it didn't feel anything like it was going to feel like. And that really is a performance piece that I mentioned. So we all have different experiences being in front of people. We all have different comfort levels with public speaking. And so I get this question. I've given this presentation to students and junior faculty a lot in the college. And this almost always comes up. So what I'm about to share with you comes from my own experience as a dance artist. And it is really to use your body and your knowledge of your body and all the ways that you have, right? Your body is a resource at that moment. All the ways that you have for being grounded, for regulating any kind of anxious responses, for breathing into that. And again, another reason to go into the space, another reason to practice in the physical mode that you'll use. So I know from experience that when I'm standing at a podium presenting, I tend to shift weight from one leg to the other. Everybody in the audience is going to get seasick, right? If I don't manage that, right? What helps me? I really have to think about my legs. Sometimes I actually have to put my hands on the podium to keep myself a little bit grounded, depending on how long it goes and what I'm talking about, etc. But you want to sort of practice so you can get to know that about yourself. And then when you're in that moment and all of a sudden you're flooded, like, oh my God, 400 people just walked in this room, right? Then you already have your toolbox ready to use at that moment. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I really like the idea of like a mantra or something to kind of like center yourself and relax. But I've never used it for a presentation, but I've done it for other things before. So I like that idea. I'll definitely try that next time.
Good. I'm glad that. Thanks for naming that. Sophia, you talked about some of the same things. It's been helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I was muted. But yeah, this is kind of, gives me an idea of what to expect in the future, even though it's really early in my program. I still like to get an idea of what's to come and what to expect, really, because that can kind of be nerve-wracking also.
Yeah. Even though it might be some time before you're giving a presentation yourself, you're still going to these conferences and symposia, you're still watching others. So as a consumer, you can start to be aware of what's working and what's not working for the audience. And then you can start to plug that into your own preparation.
Don't forget to breathe. it's easy to forget in a moment that if you don't breathe, then no words are going to get out or your body's going to get tight. So just take a breath before you start and go at your own pace. That's I was an actor for a long time before I started supporting here. Those of you who, I don't think anybody on this call, but I used to work for Sherry in the Department of Creative Arts Therapies, and so this has been a very useful presentation, just because you're presenting and public makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, and it's not a natural thing. So the more you can replicate in your living room what the experience is going to be like before you get in front of your audience, the better off you'll be, because you'll have a few different personal experiences in your pocket before you're bringing it out in front of the public. One other trick that I just remembered about, Sherry, when you were presenting about the doing Zoom presentations, trick that I want to share with folks here that you might find useful. In some cases, if you're sharing a slide deck and you only have a single screen, PowerPoint might make it so that is the only thing that can be seen, so you can't see your notes, right? So a good trick that I worked out with some folks yesterday is like, print the notes to a PDF and have those on a separate front of you, so you don't need to rely upon the notes that are built into your PowerPoint, so that you have that. So you're not relying upon only what can be seen through the screen, to again put yourself in a situation where you're in a better situation to present your very best self.
In mind when you're giving a presentation that it's really all about communication. And so even though you might rehearse, and I know that rehearsal's really been very emphasized here today, it's not to come off as stilted. For someone to simply read a paper is just deadly, right? It really is about communicating and sharing yourself. And through that, you're sharing the information and the knowledge. So one reason to kind of over prepare is so then you can let go of that a little bit and present in a way that feels natural, where you are yourself and you have the confidence that comes from the rehearsal, but then you're not tied and locked into your notes. There are others here too in the room with us. Even if you just want to share what brought you to the seminar, that's useful for us to know. If there's anything I missed.
Hi, Dr. Goodill. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, so I have done 2 online presentations this year. For one of them, it was live, and the other was pre-recorded. And I just wanted to know, is it a good thing to apologize for like a potential technical hitch? I mean, not that you haven't done your checks, you're just not sure if it's gonna happen. So for example, before you start the presentation, you go like, I'm sorry about any potential internet breakages or terrible lighting or something like that. I read somewhere that it's not good to apologize before, because then people have the idea that you are going to do a bad presentation.
Right. I certainly can understand that. Cynthia, that is such a great question, and it really comes out of your own experience, and congrats on the 2 that you've already given. In this time when everybody's figuring it out. There are always some things we can't control. I think that without apologizing, it's probably useful to just name the fact that these things can happen, right? You don't have to apologize for it. It's not your fault, right? Once you do everything you can do, there are still things that can happen. What I do recommend is that you have some kind of backup if that happens. So we had a presenter come to give a workshop at our departmental orientation. earlier this year. And something happened with the internet, a little bit into it. And the presenter knew already that they could build in a break, right, at that moment. And they just really took charge at that moment. Said, what we're going to do is take our break now. We're going to work on the back end, come back in 10 minutes, right? And reshuffled the content. So upon the return, it worked. It worked. So I think to maybe have something sort of at the ready to be able to use in case of those things happening. Today, for example, I pre-sent all of my slides to Darren in case my internet got in trouble. Teaching, I've had days when my internet went out and learned how to make a hotspot with my phone so that with a very small break, we could resume, right? I think to have some of those methods in the background, recognize they might happen, but I don't think you need to apologize. It's the internet. Does that help, Cynthia?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
match your experience at all?
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting. I don't know, I haven't done any presentations physically in the US before. So sometimes I get concerned about my accent and how people are going to, react to it. So like, this is really personal. And I was sharing this with my my mentor and my advisor, and she was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. How do you hook people onto the presentation without paying too much attention to your voice or to your appearance or your movements?" I know you talked a bit about that when Kevin asked his question, but if you could add a bit more to that.
Thank you for that question. I would agree with your mentor not to worry about it. And I would say that that I have done a lot of international presenting where, here in America, where I was born and grew up and where I learned to speak this language, I just speak as I speak. When I'm elsewhere, I'm the one who might be difficult to understand, right? So, what I think is really cool about being in academics is that in every discipline, it's an international, global community. And that our conversations will always involve different cultural and different language sources and different ways of speaking and different imagery and metaphors in our ways of speaking. And I think that's the richness of what we have and what we are as international communities of scholars and researchers and clinicians. And I think that for that reason alone, don't worry about it. It's a great thing that happens when we share each other as part and parcel of sharing knowledge. And I don't know if that really addresses the question, but it certainly woke that up in me.
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful.
So glad. Thank you for coming. I see a note from Melissa to everyone. And I'm hoping, Melissa, this was also useful for you in your search to always just improve as a presenter. Certainly we always can. All of us can. So. Darren, I'm noting the time. I don't know if you have anything you want to do as we close up.
No, we're nearing the end of our time. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's Tuesday topic. Don't forget to, if you're interested in coming back for next week, we'd love to see you. Spread the word. Tell anybody you come across to register, and they'll get the Zoom so they can join us. Thank you very much, and don't forget to vote.